Welcome to Toque Talk. Oh, you got your C-3PO mug.
It's kind of a creepy, like C-3PO torso for some reason. Like you
It is. There's no head, just his belly button, isn't it? The C-3PO navel.
Yeah.
And I got my.
Oh wow, Shania. And you get
Shania,
I guess the back of 3PO.
Yeah.
He's fluent in bocce. That's all that matters.
That's right.
And vaporizers or something.
6 million forms of communication.
Yeah. He's a what was he? A protocol droid.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, we're just getting all the chicks crazy with that talk.
We really are. We really are. Hey, everybody
Megan.
In the audience.
Hi, Marlene. Hi, Alf.
Hey,
hi,
guys.
Cyril. Hi, Christy. I just saw Christy the other day. Hi, Kiwi. Oh, it's Tina.
Tina.
All the way from New Zealand, yeah.
Nice bird photos, by the way.
She got bird photos?
Yeah, she takes pictures of birds, too.
Oh, cool. Are they like... I imagine there's a whole different breed of stuff going on down there.
Yeah, New Zealand, man. It's completely different over there.
Yeah, all kinds of different animals and stuff down there. What a beautiful place. You've been there several times, haven't you? A few times?
I have. Yeah. In fact,
you
I spent
actually
2018 Christmas. I spent Christmas in New Zealand, which was very bizarre because, of course, it's summer over there.
Oh, right.
At Christmas time. So Christmas Eve, we were driving around, and it was like 10:30 at night, and the sun was still out. It was so bizarre.
That's so cool. Wow. So
yeah, beautiful place.
What was that about? Just a trip, or was it you just hang over from a tour?
That is where, the Shania Twain 2018 tour ended there in December of 2018. Great. So, Jody and I just decided, well, why not just hang around here and have a laugh? We went to the Hobbiton.
I was going to say,
where they saw that. We got to fly over some glaciers in a helicopter. It was really.
Don't you know really the rules about musicians and helicopters? Stay away from those damn things. So what was Hobbiton like? I've always every time we go there, it's like we should go to Hobbiton, and then it kind of like our schedule gets too crazy to go. But is it actually like the actual sets from the film still exist in some form, and they treat it now as a sort of tourist thing, right? Yeah.
So it's kind of outside of the main cities, so that's why probably you didn't have time to do it, because it's like a day
outside
tour.
Of where, Wellington or
no, Auckland. So you have to drive, I believe it's south from Auckland. It ends up being like a full day tour kind of thing.
Sure.
They take you to some other places as well, but Hobbiton is the main thing that we saw on that particular thing. And you just walk through the Shire.
Oh yeah.
And
really? So it's actually like the town. Is there?
That's yes, oh, wow. And that's where they actually filmed it. So you see all the little Hobbit, whatever they're called, dwellings.
Yeah.
Kind of built into the sides of the hills, grass everywhere, green grass, and their laundry hanging on clotheslines as you walk by, like little Hobbit clothes, and a basket full of apples, and a I think there's a windmill or some kind of I forget. But then at the end, you end up in the local tavern, where you can have some Hobbit kind of drinks. I forget what they name them.
Is it a regular sized building, for God?
yeah, with regular sized tables and chairs. And
okay, so but do you actually see like Bilbo Baggins's house, or I guess Frodo Baggins?
Yeah.
Oh, wow,
yeah.
that's so cool.
And you see one of the trees, and I forget the significance of this tree, but they actually built a whole tree, and from a distance it looks like a real tree, and even up close, if you're not really looking for it. I mean, it's totally like made out of plastic, but it's just every little detail, every little leaf.
Wow.
And never.
So is the weather in New Zealand such that it can just be left out there in nature and not be like molested with by wind and rain and that kind of thing?
Well, no, they get weather like any other place. I don't, I think they just have to do a certain amount of maintenance on it to keep it going. And
I guess so. Yeah.
It's funny because actually when we were playing Auckland, I actually saw your guys' poster.
Oh, that's right. I remember you telling me that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think I took a picture with it or something. I was going for coffee, and I walked by, there's Brent, there's Todd. Oh my God, Slash and Frank.
It's is it Christchurch that had that whole lot of damage from the earthquake years ago, or a hurricane?
I think so.
We went to the kind of ground zero there. I see Theo Goutzinakis is looming about.
Uh-oh.
And Gob Theo from Gob is running. He's running 2 accounts in the.
Oh yes.
Basically, Steven's on today mostly because we just sort of. There it is. It's Theo here on Gob's behalf today. Last week
we are hijacked by our guest today last week, and so now our guest last week is hijacking this week.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So
glad to see you, Theo.
Yeah, that was fun. Theo was
fun.
Theo was so much fun, and then we had so much fun just bouncing around with Steven that it was kind of like, hey, Steven, you got to come on this week. Today, Shane is not here. He's I have no idea what Shane's doing. I think Shane might be Batman. I'm not sure what
he's probably getting a manicure or something like that.
He's got cucumbers on his eyes.
Yeah, sorry guys, can't make it. I have some errands to do, and you see him in the salon with foam between his fingers.
Fitz is already on his way to Winnipeg for the upcoming show.
That's right.
Unfortunately, Corey Churko won't be there because Corey Churko's in Shania Land now. How is that going, by the way, Shania Land? Tell me all about the rehearsals.
Well, that is they're setting up today. So tomorrow is our official first day of making noise. Oh, and then we go hardcore, right through Thanksgiving in time for our December 2nd, I think it is our first show.
That's so exciting.
So then I'll be in your neck of the woods.
Yes, you will. Will I be here? I think I'm here. There he goes. Theo says, okay, where's Steven? Changing back to Bruce Wayne or something? I think he is. Yeah, I think he's just got back. I mean, he's probably been he's in New York City, so he's 3 hours later than us. So he's probably been home a long time. Batman fights crime at night, and then he comes home, probably had his nap, and now he's getting up, having coffee, and then going to talk to the Toque guys. So,
yep.
That's crazy though. So you guys come into Vegas, and then how many shows are you doing? How many?
Only 6.
6 for the shows over how many weeks? Leg. Over 2 weeks?
2 weeks. Yeah. So three every week.
So is that like a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, or a Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, something?
It is. I don't know.
Something like that. Yeah. I mean, I ask these questions like as if I would know. Is that a real Eddie?
I think it's a Saturday, Sunday, and then a Tuesday or something like that.
Right. Yeah.
Or Wednesday.
There's always one that's kind of like free floating there. Theo's asking about this Eddie Van Halen guitar. It is an EVH. Like they put out these EVH versions of these guitars. They did the second album one, the first album one, and then they did the Frankenstein. But it's basically like it is a Frankenstein, but it's sort of like a very streamlined, simplified one. It doesn't have all the accoutrement like Eddie's actual guitar has, where it looks really jacked up, because Eddie's guitar was crazy looking. But that guitar just sort of hangs there. I never really play it. I'm not really qualified to play it, but when Corey comes over, he can play it. He can do it.
Well, it's a beautiful guitar, and I love the Floyd Rose. There's not enough Floyd Rose music these days. That's the whammy bar, the bridge, the silver thing, for those of you who don't know what a guitar is.
That's true, yeah.
But back in the 80s, everybody was grabbing their wanger and shaking it.
They're wanging their shaker and shaking their wanger.
And there needs to be more wanger shaking these days.
Well, by qualified individuals, we just did that run with on the Kiss Cruise with Night Ranger. So Brad Gillis was the king of that. He was way ahead.
That's right.
On that, you do all that kind of crazy stuff. But,
in fact, he had one of the original Floyd Rose bridges that didn't have the fine tuners. So every time he had to tune, he had to unlock it up at the nuts and then tune it that way.
I have to be honest.
They do stay in tune really well.
I am really ignorant to those things, because I never really played that kind of thing. I'm just looking around the room, and it's like 99% that. But on these, with the when you break a string on a Floyd Rose floating guitar thing like that, it just goes out to lunch.
Can you show us your wanger?
Yeah, get out the wide lens. It's gonna be
show us your wanger bar. No, I'm serious. Can you grab it there and just
grab it? Sure, I'll grab it.
Yeah. Does it float?
Yeah, I think so. Hang on, it's got a.
This is guitar 80s guitar 101, folks.
It's got a hat on top of it, so I'll wear the hat.
Okay. Ooh.
But it's let's see here.
Yeah. So see that thing up at the top? So that's a Floyd Rose, that silver thing. And then at the nut there, that clamps down to lock the string, so that when you do dive bomb and this dive bomb whammy things, the strings slacken right off, but come back in tune.
Yeah, this
If
holds
that
it all
wasn't
in
there,
place. Yeah,
right. If that wasn't
You
there,
can
then the
see-
strings would kind of unwrap at the tuning pegs and make it go out of tune, or
it
they'd
is
get
an
caught
actual EVH. Yeah,
in the nut. Yeah, cool. And then can
Single
you show
pickup.
us like a horizontal view of it?
What do you mean, like
can you
this?
pull back on it? Can you pull back on it?
On this?
Or is it fixed to the?
No, it's actually pretty fixed. Yeah, that's weird.
Okay. Yeah,
But
so you
it
can make
is
them float. So you can pull back as well as go down.
It says EVH Floyd Rose. I don't know if you can see that on the actual bridge there, but it says.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So that everybody had one of those, and if you didn't have one of those, you had a Kaler, and that that in my opinion left you wanting, because I started with the Kaler. I'm like, I need a Floyd Rose.
It was never quite right, those Kalers?
Well, they didn't stay in tune as well, and they weren't quite as
see.
dramatic when you did a dive bomb.
Okay.
Yeah.
There you go.
Is everybody bored of Wanger talk?
Yeah. Guitar talk. Now
We should bring on our guest.
I feel like Indiana Jones had a baby with, I don't know, like a 40s
Like Freddy
PI.
Krueger.
Yeah, Freddy Krueger.
Freddy Krueger mixed with Indiana Jones.
Indiana Freddy.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, maybe we should bring our boy on, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah.
Last week we had 1/4 of the legendary punk group Gob. So now we're going to get another quarter. Therefore, we've had half the band on. He lives in New York City now, so that's going to be an interesting conversation. And he was a big part of last week's show, just in the comment section. Now he's in the hot seat, ladies and gentlemen. Make some noise for Steven Fairweather. All right.
Yay!
Yay!
All this
Welcome,
talk of
Steven.
wangs and nut. I'm happy I'm wearing sweatpants tonight.
Wangs and nuts.
Happy Wang Day from here to Zen Magazine.
Oh, that's all the way from Australia. That's our good friend Andrew.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, you guys,
That's awesome. That's Andrew.
you guys are killing. When you announced me on the show, I got to say you guys are killing it. All of the fan accounts that you guys have in different countries, like you were talking about New Zealand, and I saw all these different countries, and then other just fan sites of you guys are like reposting, and I'm like, holy fuck, these guys are fucking killing it. That's such an amazing, rad thing to see. It
Well,
was so
really
cool.
is.
There's some very, very cool people all over the planet. We always, I can't remember, there was like there's one we always use for Frank. It's like Frank Kazakhstan or something like that for our guitar player in Slash's band. Frank Sidoris Kazakhstan or something we always kind of refer to, but I don't know if that exists, but it certainly should.
And I even love the name
absolutely.
Toque Talk. I can't believe that wasn't taken already. Like Toque Talk, it's the one name or the one word that like Americans, it's like toque. They kind of don't know what the fuck you're talking about. Serviette. Chesterfield,
Chesterfield,
and then free healthcare. Those four things. Lost on them.
You better back up on Chesterfield. I think you better explain what that is for everybody, because
Americans think it's like either like a cigarette or like a gun, but it's a couch.
It's a couch. Yeah, I think it was generally a couch with the kind of wooden like kind of handles on the side. I think that kind of, how I would have like a, it was like basically a very fancy piece of furniture would be a Chesterfield.
Yeah.
But I think, it definitely carried over into any kind of couch, depending on the uncle or grandparent you were talking to called it a Chesterfield for sure.
The only one phrase that maybe made it over the border was duvet, and that's probably because of Fight Club.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah. Do you know what a duvet is? Why do we need to know what a duvet is? Yeah. Serviette is basically a napkin. Let's see here. Here to Zen says, serviette, really? Aussies say that. Really? No napkins here. They say serviette. Interesting.
Well, it makes sense. I think anywhere that has the queen on their money, they know that lingo maybe.
Sure. It's an English carryover, I suppose, right?
Yeah.
Where did you grow up officially? Did you grow up West Coast, or where did you grow up?
Yeah, I grew up, born in Vancouver, grew up in a town called Surrey, in a place called Newton.
Oh, okay.
Surrey?
Wow.
Yeah,
Surrey?
do you know it?
That's You're from Surrey? Sorry? No, sorry about that.
Sorry. So that's actually
Surrey's
really
a good place.
cool. It's really cool that getting to grow up. I always say this to my friends that grew up in LA or New York or Vancouver or Toronto. It's sort of like all these places that most of us were kind of like. Corey and I grew up in Saskatchewan, and we all had our eyes on like, well, we don't want to get to the whatever the big city equivalent was, but being able to grow up in Surrey and go, well, Vancouver downtown half an hour that way or whatever. You know, hop on the train and you're like suddenly there.
Yeah. Did you guys, was it growing up? I always imagine growing up in the middle, it's like when you come of age, it's like the choice is Toronto or Vancouver. Is that kind of what went through your minds?
Pretty much.
Yes.
Yeah. The band I was in, Age of Electric, we got lured to Vancouver by our producer and a bunch of stuff, and no regrets. I still love Vancouver very much. And Corey came out to Vancouver around the same time in a lot of ways. You weren't far behind us anyway.
Yeah. I was lured as well by Katie Lang's manager, who was starting the new artist Carson Cole, and so that's made my way out there. And I kind of like the mountains and stuff too, so I was probably going to head that way anyway.
Yeah, it is beautiful.
It is interesting though, because like it wasn't until years later that I kind of found myself in Toronto and realizing all the labels were there and all the much music was there and all that kind of stuff. And I thought to myself, and not only that, but the fact that Southern Ontario had all that. You would take as many dates to get to Ontario as you would play in Ontario. And I'd be like, it kind of makes sense to be in Toronto, really, in a lot of ways, as far as the Canadian music scene. I understood but of course I understood that way after the fact, and I was way, way invested in being in Vancouver and all that kind of stuff. So I have no regrets. I really have always loved Vancouver. But I spend a lot of time in Toronto. My wife's family's from out in that area. So
right on.
It's a great city. But for you, how did you find yourself? What drew you to this dark mistress called rock and roll?
It's kind of like anything, man. It's probably just like you guys when you grow up a fan of, and it's like with everything, like any kind of art, like photos or writing or anything. You always maybe want to try your hand at it. But for me, it was my older brother started playing piano, and my mom was like, "You want to play an instrument?" And then it's just you hear songs, you want to try to practice them and redo, try to cover a Danzig song or whatever the fuck when you're a kid. And then before you know it, you're just in a basement playing shitty punk rock because that's the only thing you can play when you're shitty. and now it's a career.
But it is that you bring up a very interesting point, because I think there is always this. I mean, when you look at the origins of actual punk rock and you look back in the 70s and a lot of these kids were coming up looking at Emerson, Lake and Palmer and Kansas and Boston and very, very accomplished players making music with harmonies and very, very, very challenging stuff to play. It was sort of almost built to kind of scare people away from picking up a guitar in a funny way. Do you know what I mean? Where if you pick up a guitar and played Louie Louie, or any of the 3-chord rock and roll songs that were the previous generation, you'd be like, hey, I can do this. And then what punk rock really did was made kids who kind of thought, well, I can play these 3 chords and you can play these 3 chords and he can bash out a beat. So let's get together in the basement or in someone's garage and do all that together. And then that moment happens where suddenly you're making music together.
For sure. And I think you even have a point too, where with that bands you're talking about, it was maybe a reaction to those bands, or like you don't have to be accomplished or have it be complex or as deep as like a Pink Floyd. Like let's do something simple, but have an energy, and it's like a reaction, like kind of like maybe what like modern art was to like Renaissance painting. Like you want to be like, fuck that, what your dad did. Let's reinvent it and rebel against it. And
you're right. That happens in film and art and everything. I just want to point out that Theo Goutzinakis from the board of Surrey PC is pointing out that there is over 500,000 people in Surrey, apparently 517,887 to be exact.
I always say Theo
spitting out stats. He's just spitting out stats.
He's always been like a Rain Man kind of guy, and the fact that he knows the exact number off the top of his head proves my point that he's like Rain Man, and that's why he's my best buddy.
It's impressive. I mean, like you're absolutely right. Theo has always been really sharp that way, just boom, cranking out numbers. But no one was saying anything bad about Surrey. I don't know why you're defending it so passionately, but I spent a lot of time in Surrey. I've lived in Vancouver for 15 years, so yeah. But so then shortly thereafter, you find yourself playing with other friends, and then next thing you know, you're in a band and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
How quickly is it like talent shows and that kind of stuff, or what do you find yourself doing?
I did one like when I was like 11 or 12. I did one like I don't even know what you call it, but a bunch of kids had to go and play songs in front of their parents at a fucking convention center or whatever the fuck. And I remember there was like a list of all of our names, and there was like a little asterisk by my name. I'm like, why is this little star by my name? Like, oh, it's because you wrote your own song. I thought everyone had to write their own song. And I wrote a song called Tribute to Melvin the Martian, which was like my favorite cartoon as a kid. It's fucking horrible,
Earth
but I remember.
People make me very, very angry. Right?
How old were you?
Oh, like 11 or 12.
That's impressive. I mean, like, I love that you took it on yourself, like, to just kind of like, well, I'm going to write a song.
Yeah.
Like you said, you assumed that was part of the challenge was to write a song. So the other kids are getting up there and singing like whatever the popular song at the time was, and you walk in with. Can you remember how to play the tribute to Melvin the Martian? Do you still know how to play?
I was going to ask.
Do you still remember how to play that?
I do. It was a straight up I always had like an affinity to like kind of 50s, probably because of Back to the Future, like Earth Angel and all that. I love that kind of music. I still do, and it was just like a rip off of like a 50s kind of doo-woppy ballad riff. Yeah,
that's amazing. So what, you played it on guitar and sang it, or how did that work?
No, I just played it on guitar, and my guitar teacher did like a bass line beside me, and then we all had a group thing. We went into groups after and had to perform as a band, and we did Pretty Woman as a band and just butchered it. It was just like fucking
that's not an easy song for beginners to do.
Oh man, even as
there's
a kid,
a lot of chords in that song. Yeah.
I
was like, this is horrible. Like that, as an 11-year-old, I'm like, this is fucking the worst shit.
But how did the Melvin the Martian song go?
Well, it was just like a dum 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 dum, like a little classic bullshit 50s bum 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 dun, dun. But then it was right, I wanted to kind of get heavy, so I had that kind of pixie-ish. In the chorus, I had a look at distortion pedal, and it went hard.
Oh, wow!
Did you sing too?
I had lyrics for it, but I didn't sing. I feel like I'm building it up. It's fucking horrible. It's like a fucking
horrible
dumb.
Or not. I think I'm going to put it out to Theo right now. Theo, you need to kind of flesh out the tribute to Melvin the Martian. To see if you can work that into something.
Oh man, we need the songs. We do need the songs.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It'd be nice. It'll be like even a B-side or something like that. It would work great.
Yeah, a little Bandcamp special.
So
totally
not to jump ahead too far, but I'm very curious about how you ended up in New York City, which has always been a dream of mine. To kind of every time I've been to New York, I've always been like, I feel that energy, and I just go like, whenever we're watching Succession or any series that's based in New York, I go, damn man, I would love to put down. There is something to be said about having the right lifestyle to be able to live in New York City. Where are you currently? Where do you live?
I'm in technically the Lower East Side, but I'm kind of on the border of what they call Alphabet City, and then the East Village and the Lower East Side. I'm kind of like right in the border of those three areas. Yeah. But I'm the same with you, man. I first came here. I was in an old band back in the day called By a Thread, which is kind of how I met the Gob guys. We were on tour, and my first time in New York was around 2000, and it was just like you. I was at awe with it, but it was kind of like a relationship where at first it's just like lust. Like it's just like you have this, it's like a lust feeling, and you're kind of at awe, and you think it's beautiful, and you feel the kind of energy. And it's super cheesy, but the energy part for me, I think, was a big thing. I think I have like I kind of, sometimes have an anxiety, and I've always noticed that if I'm overstimulated, I get calm. I remember when I was like a kid, and the teacher went out of the room, and everyone kind of started going nuts in like grade 5. And I remember just like having like a dopamine hit of like calmness, and it was just in the mix of like kind of weird chaos and energy that it kind of calmed me. And I think that's maybe my anxiety can kind of chill out when everything else is crazy around me. So that hit my heart immediately, because I kind of felt just like chill, because everything else is so busy around you in the town. So it's kind of started out with like lust, and then I met a girl. You meet a girl. I met a girl in like 2007 or something, and she lived in New York, actually like a blocks away from where I live now. And we started kind of talking. This is like Friendster days, like internet kind of girl. And I would come and visit her, and I just started falling more. It started turning. I mean, our relationship didn't work out, but my relationship with the city started turning from lust into like a love. And then Tommy, our singer, moved here around that same time or so. So I would come visit him like once a year and like overstay my welcome. Like, it's insane how long I would fucking stay at Tommy's house. Like, I'm so fucked. After like 3 days of someone being in my house, I'm like, I love you, but I'm done. Like I'm done. I would say
You gotta go. Yeah.
Oh my God. I was like, it's like fruit. Like it goes bad after 3 days. You can't, you know.
Yeah, 3 days is kind of that magic number where you don't want to stay past that at anybody's house.
Yeah.
I have to admit right now that I've stayed way longer than 3 days at Corey's house.
And then you guys probably remember, but like around 2011, 2012, Vancouver real estate started blowing up.
Yeah,
and became one of the most expensive cities in the world and all this kind of stuff, and one of the most sought after cities to live in. And I grew up there. I spent like, at that point, 35 years in that city. And I started kind of like not being so down with the city because I'd been there for 35 years. I never moved anywhere.
Yeah.
So I was like, I wonder if I can like rent out my apartment and van and live in New York and have that kind of take care of most of my bills and shit like that. And I made the move. And a huge part too, man, was, I mean, anyone that visits here, you can go down to like a list of the pros of why New York is dope, and it's the food and all that stuff. But another big part, and it sounds super fucking cheesy, but it's the people. Like the people here are the kindest people I've ever met in my whole life. They're not, it's so different than where I grew up and where you guys grew up in Canada, where I think we grew up with people that are always polite and people have manners, and they say please and thank you for things, and you hold open a door and they say thank you for holding open a door. But that's just manners. I don't think that's really kindness. It's just a politeness. People here don't have manners. They're not really polite, but you try talking to a stranger in New York and they'll talk to you like a fucking person, where you try talking to a stranger in van and they kind of freak out because I don't think they know how to deal with strangers because they don't have to, because they're not compressed together, and they think you have other motives or whatever, you're hitting on them, but you're just like talking to them because you're in front of them at the line or whatever. We're here, you talk to anyone and people are so kind here. And that just fucking blew me away. The people here are just the kindest people. And I was like, I just want to live there if I can make it work. And so far, so good.
It is an amazing cross-section of humanity that you get to live with too, because I mean, Vancouver and Canada in general has like Toronto and Vancouver, any of the big cities have this, where I'm riding a train in from Brooklyn into the city and I'm like looking around and I see every denomination and every, walk of life on this one train. And I'm thinking to myself, it's hard to imagine being so, wrapped up in a world where when someone, like if you live in a place where everybody wears a blue shirt and everybody lives in this world where we all wear, and then when the guy walks in with a red shirt, you all go like, what's this guy's deal? But when you live in New York or Vancouver or Toronto, you get so much of everything that you really really have no right to really question why that guy is that way or that person is this way or that person's wearing that. It just it's the way life is. And in reality, it's the way the world is. And if you would, if people that live in these sort of more sheltered areas could see that, they would find that they would probably do a lot of good for everybody, as far as I'm concerned.
That's such an amazing point, man. That's such an amazing point, because it's so true. And even in places like Vancouver, if someone sees someone walking down the street with like a glove on their head or whatever the fuck, they'll stop, they'll point, they'll take a photo of them. Later that day, they'll tell their partner, hey, I saw this guy with a glove on his head. It'll be like a whole fucking thing. Here you see someone with it. No one even looks at the guy. They don't give a fuck what you're doing. They don't give a fuck.
They got too much going on in their own life to bother worrying about that guy.
Yeah.
But it's funny that you bring that up, because coming from Saskatchewan, like Corey and I coming from Saskatchewan, I went to Vancouver and thought it was a similar experience to what you had in New York, was, coming from a very small place and then, doing the Alberta thing and that kind of, there was back then it was a real uptight redneck vibe, long-haired rock and rollers, punk rockers
in your hometown,
in that whole area, so it's kind of like they were not really kind of hip to people being different. It seemed like, anyway, but that's true pretty much of almost anywhere, really. But getting to Vancouver, I kind of felt like, especially like living in the West End, predominantly gay, and all that kind of thing. I just felt like I could paint myself purple and no one will care.
Yeah.
I suppose being out, the difference between the West End of Vancouver or downtown Vancouver and Surrey is night and day too. Any suburban area, like it's like going out to the suburbs in New York. It gets different in Long Island. It gets different in,
it kind of gets rougher too. It's a trip. Kind of like in BC has Wally, which is kind of like a tough low income neighborhood, and here it's the same.
yeah.
The suburbs, the more east you go, the more outside of Manhattan you go. It's where the shit kind of goes down that you see on the news,
Yeah. I mean, that's to be expected. I mean, it is an interesting thing because, you'll always have these New York people tell you, oh, it's not like it was, man. It was great back. And you go, I understand that in a funny way, because there was a time where everybody could live in a loft. Every artist could survive in Manhattan. And of course, it became more and more expensive to drive that element out in a way that, now it's, Brooklyn really exploded, as you know. And
yeah.
the
But it's the
Bronx,
same with like every city. Like every 15 years, you ask someone how some city was 15 years ago. It's, oh, it was so different. It's like, yeah, it's been fucking 15 years.
Of course, yeah.
Most cities evolve unless, you're talking like little urban, towns, like even Cloverdale's changed over 15 years. But
of course, yeah.
But yeah, it's a beautiful place, man, for sure.
I love it. Every time we go out there, I was just saying last night to a friend how, like back in the day when there was like recording budgets, and AC/DC or Queen or something would record in like the Bahamas, or something like that. They would go and spend like that whole time recording somewhere fancy. I was like, I would love to be able to make records in New York or Berlin or London or Paris, and have those kind of 3-month, 4-month experiences in those cities. It doesn't exist like that anymore because now we make records literally in the very rooms we're all sitting in. That's the extent of our recording budgets. But back in the day, it would have been so exciting to go and actually have those kind of experiences, like to say, be in Berlin for like that chunk of time and have that kind of experience, how much that would sort of change the sound of a record based on where you are.
Yeah, that whole David and Iggy period when they tried to kick heroin and move to the heroin capital of Europe.
And made some of the coolest records, yeah.
Yeah, they still have Electric Lady Studios here. That's still popping off, but that's the only one I kind of know. But yeah, that'd be a trip to be in there.
100%.
So I know you're a vegan, and New York is one of my favorite places to go and eat vegan. Do you have a favorite restaurant that you eat
fuck, bro, dude,
it's the best place, right?
That's my normal like pocket answer when people are like, "Why did you move to New York?" And I say the food. I moved specifically to my neighborhood because at the time I was eating mostly like raw vegan. Now I'll just eat whatever the fuck. But where I live, you could throw a fucking rock and hit like 8 different vegan restaurants, man. Like that's another thing about this city. Not to keep going off about the fucking, it's like a New York podcast, but
no,
I'm so fucking spoiled about the convenience. Like you go anywhere else, like when I travel back to Vancouver and I'm such a little fucking bitch because it'll be like 10 o'clock at night. I'm like, what do you mean I can't get a salad and a smoothie at 10? Like, yeah. Shit just shuts down at like 9. I'm like, aren't people eating dinner at 9? Like, I can't believe it. So the fact that I can have like a vegan chicken salad delivered to me at 2 a.m. I can go get a vegan grilled cheese until 4 a.m. It's 3 blocks away.
Come on.
And it's become normal. Like that's the shitty part is that's normal. So if I ever leave or go back to Van or, whatever, I'm like, you get used to the spoils of it, man. Like
now are you squatting in New York? Like, are you illegally there? How is this working? What is
I have a visa just because of playing with the Gob guys.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, Tommy's here because he married an American, and I think his shit with some kind of keeps him legit. And then
of course, yeah.
I got a visa, like an O1 visa that lets me come and go, and
that's perfect. Yeah, that's what we all started with too. Corey would have started with that. I started with that. Yeah. And you work your way up to a green card or whatever you want to do.
I would love it. Yeah. I'm so fucking lucky. It's silly. It's so dumb.
It's really great that you did that because it does bring up a point whether even if you grew up in New York City, that's the funniest thing is I talk to my friends that grew up in like New York City and they never leave. Like they'll live in like the Bronx and they never leave the Bronx. Like they live their whole life near their family and they die there. It's like the funniest thing. So I think it's important because I had to do that. Corey's done it. Corey not only went to Vancouver, he went to Los Angeles and I went to Las Vegas. And Vancouver, then Las Vegas. I think it's really it does a lot to your head to change your environment and have this sort of reboot in a way to kind of make new friends, to forces you to make new friends, get to be more social, to make more connections career-wise, et cetera, et cetera.
Oh, for sure. It's I'm a cheese ball, so I'm going to be saying cheesy shit, but it's the true meaning of discovery. It ain't always traveling. It's changing how you look at shit, and nothing does that more than you're changing your settings. It changes how you see stuff, and it makes other things. I just feel like a cliche when I talk about it, but you're right. Yeah.
But you're right.
Well,
I think go ahead.
I can add on to that because I think that travel should be mandatory for every school kid, that they have to do at least one portion of their education in another country or another city or whatever. It teaches tolerance. It teaches you understanding, and it expands your worldview. So how's that for cheesy?
Oh, dude, I love it. I'm gonna even add on to it. We're gonna make a cheese.
Okay,
we're gonna make a fucking lasagna here, layers of cheese, because on top of that cheese, I think also it makes you appreciate where you came from. I didn't really understand.
Yes.
Or I didn't even kind of appreciate the beauty of Vancouver. The one thing that Vancouver has besides the sushi and the vegan sushi there is the beauty. Those mountains, that mountain range, having a town where snow-capped mountains go into the ocean is unmatched. You were talking of New Zealand earlier. Besides New Zealand, I don't know many places that has something like that. So the nature, if you love nature, like I grew up in like a forest, like my backyard was a fucking forest. Yeah, so to be able to play in grow up in a forest, like, like a fucking hobbit, that isn't lost on me now. When I go back, I'm like, holy fucking, it smells like, it doesn't smell like dog piss everywhere you go. You can smell the trees,
which is part of the charm of New York City. Let's be honest.
Oh man,
there's some bad smells there.
Yeah. But I think that's also true of like, people don't really have an idea. Like, I remember this one person saying to me, like, anybody who sits around watching the news too much, they go, "Oh, the world's so scary." And I go, "I've been all over, man. It's like the weirdest thing to sit on an airplane and watch like 3 movies and then wake up somewhere and get off and have an entirely new experience. Australia, Japan, South America, Europe, England, and just like, and then eventually like some of these people on our chat, like Andrew from Australia is a good friend of mine, and to know that like I have friends at every corner of the planet, and I've spent a lot of time in these places, and it makes the world seem really small. It also makes it seem really like it's not scary to me at all. Like I to get in on a plane and just go somewhere and just sort of like check it out doesn't freak me out at all. Whereas some people would be really freaked out. Like they think it's, oh no, something terrible is going to happen. Corey has done crazy stuff. Egypt, like actually went to India and like chilled there and all that kind of stuff.
That's so rad.
Way more adventurous than me. But
and the thing that you bring back from it is that people are just people no matter where you go. We all have the same basic interests: to be happy, to love our families. Yeah.
Well, the passion, I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right, man. We all just want to, again, let's add another fucking layer of cheese. We all just want to laugh. We don't want to feel pain. It's all the same fucking, we're all the same. And I think you just have to get out there to know that shit. And I think it's, people are always scared of what they don't know. That's where the ignorance kind of comes from. And that's what stems the fear, I think. And that's, and you really have to just get out there to kind of fucking know it. You can't really it's maybe like therapy. You can't be told it. You have to kind of discover it yourself and be shown it by yourself, or it won't stick. You can tell your best friend the best advice in the world, but he has to think it. It has to be his epiphany. And maybe that's what it is for travel. You can't be like, you got to go to fucking Thailand. You actually have to go and be like, oh, I get it. Like, it's like, it's like Jodie Foster.
And like anywhere, because like as a touring band, as well as anybody, when you go to say Detroit and you play Harpo's or Buffalo or some town like that, and you play in some area, often the punk rock club or the little rock club is in some gnarly area of town, in any town like Los Angeles, or like the bands that come to Vancouver and only play the Rickshaw Theater, they have the Hastings experience. They don't know anything else about Vancouver except like Vancouver is nuts. Like that's what they would walk away from, as opposed to somebody coming to Vancouver as a tourist and seeing the mountains and but when you go there as a rock band, whether it's Detroit or any town really, you can see some of the gnarliest areas of town. But I still walk away from these towns going like, but every city has a crazy part of town that you're like, you tend to avoid necessarily, but
Yeah.
It's just sort of the way things go. So it's hard to kind of be like, oh, you know, that town is crazy. It's like, yeah, sure, every town's crazy. It's usually based upon whatever experience you had in that town. Some girl broke your heart in Montreal, so I hate Montreal, you know, or whatever it is. Like, you know, people say, I'm always like rolling my eyes, like, what are you talking about? Have you ever had a bagel in Montreal? Like,
I hear they're good.
Yeah. Well.
Yeah. Well, Vancouver does it. Vancouver also has that specialness to it too, because I think of the warmth. It's the one place where people that suffer from homelessness or mental illness can move there, and they won't die in the winter from living outside. Actually, I worked at a place called Insight. It's a safe injection site in Vancouver. And it was the first one in North America. And it was a place where people could come and shoot up drugs safely. And so we'd kind of save them from overdose and give them their clean needles and kind of monitor them and stuff. And most people are kind of from all other places, because it's such a, I don't know the word, but it's such a place where people kind of transient. It's such a transient kind of city too. So it kind of does have a bit of spiciness to it, because people that grew up in where you guys are from, you can't even really, homeless people where you guys grew up would be like fucking, it's a death sentence, like to live outside during your guys' winter.
They wouldn't survive. They wouldn't survive one winter. No.
Yeah. So Vancouver kind of calls to people too in that way too.
Los Angeles has the exact same problem, and people complain. Like more recently, there's been a real problem, you know. But it's like people are complaining about the homeless in Los Angeles, but complaining about the homeless in Vancouver, and I'm like. These are homeless. These are basically the country's homeless. The homeless make their way to places like Los Angeles to survive through the winter. Even in like a place like Las Vegas, they're not going to survive through the summers here. It'll kill people. You know what I mean? And it's really like it's a national problem. You know, it's not just Los Angeles's problem. That some guy from Cleveland and another guy from, you know, wherever else, that they all landed in Los Angeles to survive. And BC is the same problem. Vancouver has the exact same situation. You know, we all know walking up and down Hastings, which is oddly become, as it's getting gentrified, you know, it's sort of shifting as well. Just seeing that same thing. But those people aren't born and raised in Vancouver. They're from Montreal and Winnipeg and Toronto and everywhere else. Yeah. It's just what happens.
But it's got the mildest weather, so
and
living on the street is doable all year round.
And probably like a LA, where you guys are at in Vancouver, it's probably a lenient government where they're not going to like hassle you, because like we're kind of learning now that like drug addicts aren't criminals. They're addicts, and it shouldn't be treated like a fucking criminal act and
it's more of a mental
Yeah,
it is one of those things that they're only sort of scraping the surface of any sort of solution is the wrong word, but treatment, I think, is the best word. I just watched this whole documentary on, you know, outside of the hard drugs that, you know, we experience on the West Coast, or basically anywhere really, but the way that the Oxycontin and opioids have really taken over, like really, you know, normal middle class people all over the country, all over North America, really, where it's not just some sort of like junkie problem or some sort of like, you know,
it's white kids now. It's like it's like an echo of the crack epidemic, where people, I don't think, not to get over whatever, but people didn't really give a lot of shits because it affected the inner city black culture. But now these like just, you know, middle class white kids are getting addicted to oxy, and then they're getting their oxy prescriptions taken away, so they're going to heroin because it's the same feeling. It's cheaper, and they're getting addicted to heroin. And now it's like on the news each night of the opioid epidemic, and it's fucking nuts. It wasn't there just a I'm curious about the documentary, but there was also like a show that they just
Dope Sick is a series with Michael Keaton. It's it's really amazing, but it's so infuriating because, as usual, you know, when Oxycontin is not it is a legal narcotic. It is a prescribed narcotic. And when you get into a show like that and you start, well, I mean, I've gone down a rabbit hole beyond just a series, but it sort of really makes you frustrated in the fact that these companies are able to get away with so much because, you know, it's the red tape of these businesses. And, you know, there's pharmacies that get broken into and they will literally only steal Oxycontin. There's this other stuff that, you know, is a good time too. Not even a candy bar, you know, not even like a You know, like, it's like, no, you just stole Oxycontin. I'm like, wow. It's like,
Yeah.
and it's you know, and it's one of those things that, you know, as a person who I've been a boring sober person for a long time, so it's, you know, but I've always been that person. I'm like, look, I clearly it's a problem that needs to be handled one way or another, and it's sort of like it's easy for us all to kind of like go like, oh, that guy's or those people, you know, and just kind of walk the other direction. It's a massive problem.
Yeah, for sure.
With that, with what solution, I really honestly don't know at this point. Johnny Langdon's talking about it in Winnipeg and all kinds of places. I actually been enjoying watching Theo kind of stir shit up on this about.
Is he bad mouthing Saskatchewan?
He was saying something about tough guys. Wally's tougher than Windsor, and then tougher than Saskatchewan, I believe is what.
Okay.
I'm paraphrasing probably.
Yeah, he's really getting amongst it today.
Yeah. He is living his best life in the comment section. No surprise. Yeah. But yeah, no, it's I don't know how we got into all this, but it's been really interesting watching that whole thing happen. But so the what is your long-term plan? Do you feel like New York? Is it one of those things where you get to New York and you feel like, wow, this feels more like home than anywhere else I've ever been?
Yeah, it kind of happens slowly, and it kind of happens. It becomes clear. The picture becomes clear the more, maybe like you guys, the more when you go back to visit what was your home, and you're like, oh, like it doesn't feel like home anymore.
Yeah, that's a weird feeling. Yeah,
it is. I can see myself in the future doing half and half, just because my folks are getting up there, and I would like to spend time with them. Because as we all know, and we see it with our friends, and you know, when people eventually go, you know, no amount of money can buy a second of time, and you always wish you just had more time with people when they go. So I can see myself in the future doing half and half, like snowbirding it in New York, and then half the time in van. But
yeah, like you couldn't have pretty much moved further away, really. I mean, like you're 3,000 miles away. You're in a different country. That's, you know, I mean, you could have moved to Nova Scotia or something like that, I suppose. But it is a vastly different lifestyle. We always used to imagine that living in downtown Vancouver felt almost Manhattan-y. You know what I mean? Like almost like, you know, like you could, you know, but it's not even close. Not even close. Like, no. The speed of life in New York is times 1,000 to what's going on in
it's a different vibe for sure. Yeah.
100%.
And I get like the talking, going back to the anxiety thing, the thing that calms me when I go back really anywhere, I notice that energy's in there. So all of a sudden it's like a different thing. And also, like you guys probably know, like when you go back to a place where you grew up, there's a weight. There's like the history can be a bit of a weight, and that gives anxiety and fear and yeah, it's just a weird kind of history to it, and that can kind of weigh on you. And so to be free of that is real fucking lucky that I can. But it's also maybe a challenge to deal with that weight and try to, I don't know, turn it into something.
Right. So New York is kind of like a fresh start, I suppose. Being there,
because you can
new people.
No one knows you. Like I'm not even good at making friends. Like talking, I go days without speaking out loud. Like I'm pretty. I have to fight the reclusiveness. I have a bit of a reclusive vibe.
I'm like that as well. Yeah, it's to tell me like you got the day off, just stay inside and I don't know, watch a new series. I'm like,
right.
Okay, you don't have to tell me that twice. I'm like, okay.
Silver lining to COVID. Like I remember when I first saw on the news, don't try not to hug or kiss people. I remember feeling my lips whisper, finally. I felt like I've been practicing social distancing my whole life.
Yeah, exactly.
A mandate, but yeah.
Where does that come from in you? Do you think is it just genetics, or you're all obviously very introspective, so you're probably good with yourself as your own company because you think a lot. Is that true?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, for sure.
So you can have your own discussion with yourself and, think about things without any outside interference.
Yeah. And I've recently been trying to, I started doing this little radio show a while ago, and I started doing these kind of rants before I start playing music. I started doing like these rants. I started to try to make thoughts into like more like a comedy and make them insightful and do little rants. And I noticed some people kind of tuned in just for that. They didn't give a fuck about what David Bowie song I'm going to play next. They just want to hear these rants. And then I kind of pivoted that into I started like a YouTube channel where I do like a video version of like these kind of comedy rants. I try to make them thoughtful, but to answer your question, I don't know where it comes from. I think it maybe comes from when you're born into a family, if you have older siblings or if you don't have older siblings, I think that is what molds you. I think you are kind of like fluid and you fill whatever void hasn't been filled. So I think with me, I had an older brother that was kind of loud and very charismatic and charming and a real center of attention guy and really loud. And that was his role. So I'm like, okay, I can't be that. So I think maybe I filled the role of like being the kind of quiet guy, the kind of guy that just sits and watches. And I think if you grow up a person, it was always a hindrance as a kid because I was like a fat kid and I was awkward as fuck and like I felt fucking lame and I was quiet and shy and reserved and filled with fear. And I think that forces you to be more of a watcher. And when you're more of a watcher, you're more of a listener. And I think if you can, as an older person, realize that that's kind of a gift because you didn't go through life talking, you went through life listening. No one ever learns nothing from talking.
That's
maybe
true.
Therapy, but you learn from fucking listening. So I think if you grew up as a kid made or put into a position where you're just listening to people and watching a dynamic play out in front of you, you can understand things a little bit more and you can kind of see the blueprint more than having to like design it yourself, I think. And that's maybe where it would come from. It maybe.
Yeah, I think.
And so when you get on stage, do you become an actor or is that the one time where you can actually let out and be an extrovert in that moment? Or I mean, I really haven't seen you play live, so maybe you're not that person on stage, are you?
Oh, no, it's a good question. And it's so rad because I played in some other bands before, kind of like a post-punky hardcore band, which is how I met the Gob guys. And actually a friend of yours, Todd, Ryan Dahl was one of our first kind of producers. And it's kind of how we met Theo and stuff. So with those bands, and then I kind of played in more of a band that was kind of like a Radioheady kind of like, one of those bands. And those were kind of different because the energy was different on stage because it's more like a thoughtful kind of rocky songs. But with Gob, it's so what made me join the band really was again, add another fucking layer to our vegan lasagna of cheese here.
Let's do it.
The energy of the crowd, like playing like in a band like that, Radioheady kind of band, it's like, you're kind of playing with people and everyone has a vibe that they think they're cool and you think you're cool and you're playing this music you think is cool. When I went to a Gob show, no one thinks they're cool at a Gob show. Like they just want to go to have fun. They want to sing along. No one goes there thinking they're the coolest guy in the room. They're just like fucking people that go to a show to have fun. And that's something that I was really kind of missing, and to be a part of that, it made me kind of get into that energy. And it's something I still overthink it. I'm still, I think we're all still that 13-year-old in our heads when we're thinking. And I still overthink it before I get on the stage. And I always feel like I got to take a shit and I'm always nervous. And that kind of shit. But then once I play the first note, it's on. Like I go, I remember Theo even had to tell me one time, like, hey, just calm down. Like you're kind of like, I'm playing so shitty. I'm like the third best bass player in the band now. I'm already not a good bass player, but I was going off so much. I'm like playing the wrong notes because I'm just like having so much fun because the crowd's having fun. And I'm look over and like, I love those guys in Gob. So I'm like, I'm playing, and it almost gets to a point where doesn't even matter what music is coming out of your amps. Like it's the crowd's reaction that, who gives a fuck what's coming out of this way of our amps? And again, another layer of cheese, it's what's coming from the audience that kind of feeds you.
That's true.
And those fans are awesome. Sorry, I missed what Theo said there, but it was probably brilliant.
Oh, I was going to put it back up, but you were doing really well. But yeah, Theo chimed in. I've been trying to make Steven play like Flea from the Chili Peppers, not his bass style, but naked with a sock on his junk live. Thanks for that, Theo.
Thanks, Theo. Thanks, buddy.
No, I think that's
really
you bring up a
interesting.
good point. Yeah, go ahead.
No, exactly what you said, because I think I can relate too. because I'm a bit of that introvert, and definitely I'm totally fine with my thoughts. I can go a whole day and just, you know, contemplate whatever. And there was a point in my life where I quit music. I was a computer animator, and I was just always on the computer creating, you know, visual arts instead. And that was the hardest point in my marriage, because my wife said, I always got to see you come alive whenever you played music, and now all I see is the back of your head. So the music is where you do become that actor, and I think it nurtures something for us introverts to be able to do that. You know, it's kind of like therapy.
I think part of the charm of Gob too is like you said, it wasn't the kind of gig you went to kind of be like hipster cool and like look like, you know, it was like a bunch of kids who were just being themselves, and it was fun as fuck. Like those guys were like, you know, we were always like blown away by the energy, and it's a very you know, like it just contagious. The audience is just the energy, and like you say, that sort of trade back from the band to the crowd to the band. And it's just this great big thing that just sort of like, it's really healthy. You know what I mean? Like in a way, it's interesting that you bring up the word actor, because it's a similar thing for me. I'm not the kind of person, you know, even though like in this context or in any sort of stage context, it's, you know, outrovert, you know, extrovert kind of like, we're doing this, we're doing that. But in day-to-day life, I'm a quiet, normal person, you know what I mean? Like, but there's something about the ability of getting on stage and just kind of going, you know, just turning that on. And it just, it's not like some sort of like forced or faked kind of thing. It's just sort of natural. You know what I mean? Like the energy you feel, and the energy that is conducted through the instrument, through the music, through the people, just sort of creates that. And in a lot of ways, I think like most of us, I've always said when people go like, well, don't you get nervous when you go on stage? I go, you know what? The funny thing is I never get nervous on stage. I'm more at home on stage than I am at some like awkward family dinner with like, you know, like with that whole thing and some people you don't really know. And that whole thing, it's such a weird
cliche. And I think stand-up comedians talk about it too. And I think you can really notice it too. And you guys know this far more than I do, but it's so weird how you can almost be yourself more on stage in front of strangers than if you ever have family come to a show and they're like front row. Comedians famously never let anyone they know or family sit at the front. They have to be back in the dark because they start thinking, and they kind of, it makes you second guess, and you get in your head.
It takes you out of it. Yeah. It takes you out of it.
You can't be yourself in front of the people that you know. It's such a weird trip too. But it's also that it's a mind hack, right? Because obviously you get that dopamine hit. That dopamine hitter is dripping in your brain, and that's coming into you, and that's kind of like even being a sober guy, like that's your Oxycontin, like that's your
I recommend that over Oxycontin. I think, you know, it is that sort of Clark Kent, Superman, Peter Parker, Spider-Man, Bruce Wayne, Batman thing of being able to kind of like, you know, you do that. It's not like you put on a costume. You basically look exactly the same sitting there as you do when you walk on stage playing Gob. But there is something to be said about that. You step onto this elevated platform and start playing, and it just creates this energy that changes the entire pH level of the room. It's a beautiful thing, really. I mean, something we probably take for granted, really. For sure. It's just so normal that to us, that it's just like, it just seems so, any other way of life would be very strange. And it's like you say,
it's a gateway to, because of that energy that you're speaking of and the dopamine hitter, it's why drugs and alcohol or women become such a huge factor, because you want that after the show to kind of keep going. I check myself all the time. I have such an urge to like just be with someone physically after a show, and it ain't even like a horniness. It's just, I know it's like a dopamine addiction where my brain wants my ego or the same chemicals that were just being given to me on stage for an hour to keep continuing it. And I know I can't do hard drugs anymore, and I'm not a big drinker. So like I try to I fight the urge to be with, you know, a girl. And it's such a weird cliche, but that's why it is a cliche. Cliches always come from things that were truth. And that's why it's a cliche, because you want to carry that, you want to keep riding that wave. And that's what gets, it's such a fucking cliche. It's what gets, I mean, you guys know more than I do.
Yeah, it's the dangerous cycle that all the musicians who get caught up in other stuff, because it's like the party the party that I was just experiencing on stage needs to continue. And unless you learn how to compartmentalize that sort of like, that's done, you know, I mean, at a certain point, I think you kind of learn to kind of, at least I sort of learned that that's done. I'm walking off stage and I'm slowly sort of changing back from Dr. Jekyll back into Mr. Hyde. You know, you kind of slowly become, okay, now let's figure out how to get from Red Deer to Calgary, you know, right. And that whole conversation of like, okay, well,
yeah, that's a good point too. Like that post stage life, like people don't know, but like the other 23 hours of the life is quite lonely. Like, especially at that level that you guys are at, I still have to share a bed or rooms with the fucking Gob guys, but going back to like a empty hotel room after like a gig is like, it's so, you're at such a high point to like such a lonely, it can be such a lonely fucking place because you're just with the same dudes. You're alone in a fucking hotel room, and it's a trip. It's a yin yang. It's such a weird speedball of joy and loneliness. It's funny,
especially with the sobriety aspect of it, because it's like it's so jarringly. It's so normal to me now, but you're right, that jarringly like, you know, just this massive amount of affection and adulation, and then walking into a quiet room and watching Forensic Files or something. You know, it's just kind of like you're just sort of sitting there by yourself. You went from like to like dead silence in your room. It's but it's so normal. You know, I mean, like it's something that I've become so like, it's just become normal to me. Oh, here goes Theo again.
Theo.
I'm more hornier. I'm more hornier watching this than on stage, he says. I like how there's Theo Goots, there's Theo and the Thugs, and Gob. He's got 3 accounts going right now.
He has multiple personality disorder. So those are 3 personalities. They're all sweethearts.
Yeah, they're all great. They're all great. I mean,
so let's talk. Go ahead, Todd. No, I was going to say, let's move on to Stranger Radio. Because this is a radio, like an actual radio station or internet radio, or what is it?
Yeah, an internet radio station. Yeah. So I got asked. Yeah.
Go ahead.
I got asked years ago. There was this girl that I met at this dive bar called the Library Bar. The best, next time you're in Manhattan, the best jukebox in the city is at a place called the Library Bar. And I would just go there and drink. So I go on and off drinking and not drinking, but a long time I was just drinking soda waters. I would just go there, get soda waters, and just listen to this fucking jukebox. And all of my friends that I've made in New York, which is like 3, I've met them all at that Library Bar. And this one girl that I know that I met at that bar, her mom was a manager of a radio station, and she was joining up with this internet radio station called 8 Ball Radio that back in the day were like some kind of like art political zine, like an undergroundy thing. And they had this, they're expanding where they had like a radio station. They're still doing their zines. They had like a TV channel and a whole bunch of kind of shit. And she asked, would you want a radio show? And I've always been fucking obsessed with Pump Up the Volume, that you guys, I know, probably were obsessed with too, maybe, or you loved it growing up with Christian Slater. I fucking love that movie. Oh,
yeah. Oh, yeah, right.
And
I wasn't sure if you meant the song or where you were going.
Yeah.
Good song too. So I jumped at the chance of doing it, and I remember going there my first time, and it was a huge basement in like Soho underneath like this like shoe store or something, and it was fucking nerve-wracking. Like I'm really bad around people. Like as we were speaking, even like when I was joining Gob, I'm a little bit better now, but if I ever noticed more than like 3 people listening to me, I would start like stuttering and like my voice would waver and like just a fucking bag of anxiety, like didn't enjoy it. You know what I mean? Like, and so the radio thing was a bit nerve-wracking because they would play it. It was a huge basement. So there'd be someone working on the zine in one corner, the TV people doing something. They'd be organizing a protest or some shit in the other fucking corner. And then the radio show would be like played over top of the speakers, and it was so fucking nerve-wracking. I started talking so quietly and softly, and I still talk like that on the radio now. It just kind of became my fucking thing. I can't get out of it, but that's how it kind of started. And then I did it for like a year at their station, and then I kind of started thinking, like everything, like with comic books or photography or poetry or music, you kind of want to maybe just do it yourself. Anything you're a fan of, you maybe want to try your hand at doing. And I'm like,
Sure.
man, I kind of have these fucking music nerd friends, and I know some characters. I'm like, I should maybe just start my own station. And then that's what I did a year or two into 8-Ball Radio, and I love them. They like won awards and shit for the best whatever the fuck, and they kill it, and they're still killing it, and they're
Cool.
primarily just New York based. And so I just started one. It's way smaller, and but it's Stranger Radio, and it's been fun. And the best thing about it is another layer of the fucking lasagna here, my man, is building this community, the Stranger Radio family. We have like people, it's all over the world now. There's not a lot. We have like maybe 30 shows, but we have in different countries. We have like a professor in London that teaches like music, and he does like a power pop kind of show, and just these amazing, and like an older kind of dudes. And we had like an 11-year-old do a show and give her thoughts on shit, which was the fucking best shit I've ever heard. And some obscure punk rock shows and hip hop shows, and that's how it kind of came to be. Yeah. And this is our shirt. This is our symbol.
Okay.
Great.
So
That's great.
so is it like always broadcasting, or like one of the times when people can tune in?
It's all on strangerradio.com. So we have a show reel of all the past shows. There's a schedule on there. It's 1 or 2 shows a day. It's really sporadic. Most shows are bi-weekly, some are weekly. But whatever you're into, there's like been a bunch of shoegazy shows and whatever kind of genre you like.
I saw there was a show called The Garden of Vegan. What's that all about?
That's fuck, you would love this. So I met this dude. We were playing a show in Montreal, and as you guys fucking know, we're like, I'm very lucky to play in Gob, but we're kind of fucking nobody. So we're not getting like interviews all the fucking time. But whenever we do, it's always the same kind of shit. So whenever someone's a little bit different with an interview, you kind of take notice. And this one guy in Montreal started asking us like comic book questions and nerd questions, and talking with Todd earlier, like science fiction questions. And I'm like, my ears perked up, and we just ended up talking, and he ended up transitioning into having his own kind of pop culture news show called the Ryan Stick Show, and he fucking kills it. He interviewed like the director of Friday the 13th and like all these horror people, and the guy's fucking killing it. I can't believe he's on my station. But he also has a YouTube show that he does video interviews with all these people and real genre based things, is what it's such an amazing thing how we grew up as liking nerd stuff, and Corey and Todd growing up vegetarian or vegan and liking nerd stuff. It's so amazing to see how that is like the fucking, what became nerd culture is now just a fucking culture. Like the biggest movies on the screen are nerd movies. Like the vegan is blowing up. It's kind of funny that like what you were maybe made fun of in the 80s and 90s is like the fucking becoming the norm now. Anyways. Yeah. So he has the Ryan Stick Show. His wife is Mel, and she's a hardcore vegan, like the one that like posts the real harsh atrocities that you know, pigs being whatever the fuck. I can't watch it, but and she's like, hey, can I do a show where I talk about food or vegan tips or blah, all this kind of stuff? And I'm like, fuck yeah, there's no gatekeeper at Stranger Radio. Like I don't give a fuck. Like as long as you're not like homophobic or like a racist piece of shit, like you can do anything you want on Stranger Radio. So yeah, she's awesome.
It's funny that you bring that up, because it wasn't that long ago where I just said to somebody, I go, if you would have told me 20, 30 years ago that not only would there be a Thor movie, that it would be like massively successful, I would have said you're out of your mind. Because when you start talking about like the MCU, for example, it's kind of like, when Iron Man blew up, I go, dude, you don't understand. Iron Man was like, when you really talk about like superheroes, and you got your DC guys like Superman and Batman, then you talk about the Marvel stuff like Spider-Man, the Hulk, X-Men. Iron Man's way down the rung, down the ladder. Yeah, like you're talking like Iron Man's like way down. Like, I mean, we all loved that stuff, and we all knew who he was. But the fact that they could turn that. And I think that was kind of the big sort of like, we can turn Iron Man into a mega successful thing, then we can turn anything. Like the fact that, we just went and saw the Eternals, which was better than what the heat it's getting, to be honest, that the negativity it's getting. But, like Guardians of the Galaxy, Eternals, all these titles that were like, dude, I'm like a nerd and I'm like still reaching. I'm like, I'm vaguely aware of these things, but these are multi-billionaire, billion-dollar success stories. And I remember Kevin Smith just saying something like, look, when I was a kid, I never thought these things would ever exist. So I'm going to enjoy them for what they are. And that's kind of how I feel. Like, when we're talking about like a Shazam movie, I'm like, well, hell yeah, I'm going to that. It's like, and then when you get into Star Wars stuff because recently a friend of mine goes, well, do you think with this Eternals being kind of their first slip up, do you think it's over? I go, dude, do you know how many slip ups there's been in Star Wars? And we still go every goddamn time to see a new Star Wars movie or a new series. It's like Corey and I both have been ranting about, like, we'd be ranting about this film or that film in the Star Wars series, but still, like, then all of a sudden a year later, there's an announcement and you go, oh yeah, let's go to that. That's just the nature of this kind of lifestyle, or this kind of like these interests.
It's a storytelling. Like, it can be through any filter. We're so lucky that it's what we liked as kids, and it's like the nerdy shit, the shit that you'd get bugged about, that is the stuff blowing up. But it's just good storytelling, and you can have flops with stories, and or you can have fucking home runs. And Marvel kind of has a thing where they've really gotten the whole kind of action movie with comedy that has a little bit of heart, and they fucking nail that almost every time. It's action with comedy with heart on top, and that's such a good mash. They can't all be the Dark Knight like that, or the new Batman looks fucking brilliant, but they can't all be the dark noir detective story. It has to be. And even Marvel has little waves of differences, from Ant-Man, that's like the heist movie, to Eternals that try to go so cosmic. That's the only thing that they maybe lost people on. It went so big, and they tried to go so emotional.
It was
there's so much crying in that movie. Like, fucking, there's like 5 crying scenes. Constantly crying. But they went so big.
It's not much fun. Yeah.
It was a swing. It should have been. I know people are talking about this. It should have been a 5-part Disney Plus show, or a 7-part where they went into each character, have more time. It's to tell this story is 1,000,000 years old. Like, they need time to tell the story of these eternal beings instead of fucking 3 hours.
I don't know if you're like me though, because when I was young, I remember being like obsessed with Kiss or obsessed with Star Wars or whatever. And I always thought it was weird to me that some guy would make fun of you for having your whole house, your whole room full of Star Wars stuff, or your whole room full of Kiss. And then you go to their place and their whole house is full of Edmonton Oilers or or the Green Bay Packers. And I go, this is just as nerdy in a much different way, And it's a very interesting conversation that, it's like, you're obsessed with a team, that you don't play on that team. It's like, so to me, it was,
and not only that,
but I'm saying this as a fan of sports as well. Like, I love all that stuff, but to me, it's kind of like it's human nature to become obsessive, not obsessive, but to kind of find your thing and just love it and dig in and just, that's what I'm into. And I'm gonna, just make my whole personality about this stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, because it's something that you can be obsessed with, that kind of gives you something. It's giving you content. It's giving you stories, and as I think as humans, we like, these superheroes are just, there are modern day Greek gods, right? They're retelling these stories of these superhuman beings that have been talked about for hundreds or maybe thousands of years, of these amazing, fantastical stories of what humans maybe can be, maybe down the line with like technology, or like what we can evolve to. And it's inspirational, and it's a way to tell lessons.
It's one of the things, if you want to bust out some cheese, I've always said, like, it's something to be said about the fact that in real human, and it's been this example after example after example of people who become powerful in our human sense, whether it's money and fame and all that kind of stuff. Unfortunately, human nature seems to turn a lot of that stuff into the darkest of places. Do you know what I mean? Like, a lot of people can be turned where, you get enough money or enough power to just sort of do whatever you want. And sometimes that doesn't bring out the best in people at all. Do you know what I mean? So sometimes when you have, whether it's a Captain America or a Superman, where you kind of go, these are people who are really powerful. And I'm using this as a complete metaphoric parable of sorts, that, Superman's, the all-powerful being, but he was raised by these really nice people in Kansas to contain that and to do good and to do better things. Where if he wasn't, he would just take whatever he wanted, be it money or sex or, whatever he wanted. And I always feel like that's such an example of, like, what people should be, as opposed to this sort of like, get out there and make all the money and, you know, and just take whatever you want. And I really feel like sometimes that's sort of like, when people get power, they kind of tend to lean into their darkest things rather than their best things. You know, that's not always the example, but there are so many examples of people who go mad with power. Every cult film, every film on a documentary on Netflix you can find, or on HBO, about cults are 100% about that. That guy who gets too far gone with power.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden he has to have sex with everybody's wives for some reason.
There's always a guy on top.
Way.
That's one.
Yeah,
it's always on top. He just wants to have sex. But you're totally right. Whenever power, people that want power just want more of it. When they achieve it, they want more, and it's a never-ending black hole.
Don't want to lose
the richest
it.
people
Lose it.
Yeah, and they just want more. There's a story of it was Kurt Vonnegut and another writer that they were like buddies. I forget his name, but they went to some extraordinary rich guy's house, like a, you know, crazy rich guy's house that had, like, you know, Warhols on the wall and all these cars and these fancy model women walking around and Picassos and stuff. And he's like, you know, this guy made in like a day what you made selling like your whatever #1 book. And he goes, but I have one thing that he'll never have. And Vonnegut goes, what? He goes, enough.
Wow.
And I'm like, fuck, that's such a rad.
That is a really rad thing. Yeah. I mean, I think, I don't know about you, but I'm not wired that way to be kind of like, you know, everybody wants to be able to pay their bills and make sure that their car can get them from point A to point Z and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I don't really have that thing of like, I need to have this and I need to have that. And I need, you know, I need for everybody to see that I have this and I have that. It's kind of like, whatever. It's, you know, it's stuff. And, but that also goes into a much deeper thing about what those people, and like I say, if they're raised by Ma and Pa Kent from Smallville, Kansas, maybe they would have been like, you know, sort of directed into that. And I just sort of use that as sort of a modern American mythological tale, like in the sense of like this, you know, really powerful person could be directed in a way to be helpful, to want to help human beings and to help his fellow man, as it were, you know, even though for all intents and purposes, he's an immigrant, he's from somewhere else and he came here to help us, you know, I mean, that, and I think it's so much more than just sort of like, oh, he's an alien and he can fly, you know. To me, it's like, I've always been that kid that was reading so much more into that stuff that to me, it meant so much more than just that kind of like fight bad guy, the end. He'd go to jail, you know, like that.
Right.
Yeah.
No, you're right. And it goes the other way too. It's the people, the biggest villains in real life, or the people that have created the most atrocities, or maybe even like the richest people in real life. It would be curious to know, hey, what's your relationship with your dad? Not to be whatever, but like, yo, like, how's you and your dad doing? And I bet you there's fucking more times than not, there's something there. And it goes to what you're saying with Clark and his parents. It's the blueprint, and it's the whole, if you, as a child, if you're not fed love on a silver spoon, you're going to learn to lick it off of a knife.
Yeah. Oof. Whoa.
And that's going to make shit dark as fuck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's 100% true. You're 100% true.
Totally.
What is Rob Noakes asking? Did Steven ever play bass with Wycliffe, the bass player, or the see bands like House of Commons, the Subhumans, or No Means No? I remember Wycliffe. Wycliffe was a giant German friend of ours who played bass for a bunch of cool shit. But yeah, that's all the Vancouver. You're probably too young for a lot of that. So maybe No Means No.
Fuck, I love No Means No. The guy. Fuck, I feel like a dick for not remembering his name, but the bass player from the Subhumans, that safe injection site on Hastings that I worked at for a while. Gabe actually works for the same company. A lot of Vancouver musicians worked for this company, but I wish I could remember his name. But the bass player from the Subhumans worked at it's called Insight, at the safe injection site with me for a while before he passed away. And he was a good dude, not a great worker, but a fucking good guy. So that's the only Subhumans.
It's funny you bring that up, because a lot of my friends and new pornographers and a bunch of different Vancouver, they all work in the safe injection sites. It's such a really cool thing. And Vancouver is sort of living in the future that way ahead of that curve. But they're handling their problem in the only way that they know how to handle it. It's not really a problem, but you know what I'm saying? Like they're handling that situation. And if only we could see that into Los Angeles and a few other places to kind of figure out how to contain.
You guys
that.
will. I think you guys
will.
will.
I think it will. Yeah.
The roadmap's there. Vancouver with the how they handled or are handling the homeless and the drug addicts took their shit from what was going on. The company is called the Portland Hotel Society. They took that name because of what was happening in Portland. But even decades before that, there was a town in Germany that had some of the first injection sites, and they saw the data from that of how it saves lives, and it actually, to the people more on the right side and the Republican side, that for them, what they liked was that for every dollar that a place like that spends, it saves the taxpayer $5. Because if someone ODs on the street, it's hundreds, it's like $700 for an ambulance just to come check on someone on the street if they're ODing. If you go take them back to the hospital, it's thousands of dollars. So if we can handle an OD in our facility, we're getting paid whatever an hour, and the person doesn't have to go to a hospital. You're saving so much money by helping these people. And also, there's never any judgment, but if you ever did want to get clean, you got to be alive to get clean. So we had those facilities. We had a detox above us and transitional housing above that we could help people if they wanted to. But we didn't ever tell them they should or suggest it to them, but it was there if they wanted it. And that's the approach you have to take. A lot of people would see it as, when it first popped up, of like celebrating drug use, but you're not. You're celebrating the drug user's life. And that's something that people miss, that they're fucking, and this is getting a big fucking cheese lasagna here, Philip. But
I'm getting hungry.
They're everyone's sons or daughters. Like, they're fucking, they're someone's family.
That's true.
And that's
that's the saddest thing about that whole conversation is, like you say, it's like, also to bring up that Portland and Seattle also have the similar problem of being West Coast cities that are survivable in their climate. So that's why they have similar problems. But you're right. A lot of these people, you know, they're not just all people who were just doomed from the beginning, came from bad families. It just sort of was it's like, I was just over at a friend's house today. The parents, him and his wife, are both sober. They're both, program sober. Like they're like, they have a baby, and we just had this conversation of like, it's interesting to imagine that they will never know that their parents, had a drink, their entire life. That kid's going to be like, my parents don't drink, my parents don't party, but they're both, rehabbed, clean and sober people who attend meetings and all that kind of stuff. So, but that child, very well may have a gene within him that has that addictive nature. And everybody has something. Do you know what I mean? Like we all have some kind of, we live in a society where sugar and caffeine is plentiful, some of the most, most addictive stuff there is. But if you're lucky enough to just be addicted to that, then at least you can, survive within a regular society. But if you have that other little gene, whether it comes to alcohol or any sort of narcotic, then you're immediately on a bad path. And it's just a matter of like, hopefully pulling yourself out of that before you're immediately into a complete dive.
Yeah.
Because there's just as many, like when you look at a safe injection site, we can have, conversations all day long about how alcoholism has ripped people apart, but it's fully legal and totally normal and totally understood. And, Mike, he's a bad drunk, and that's just sort of like somehow more accepted than, what we're talking about. Yeah.
I fully agree, man. I fully agree.
But we have kept you so long, Steven, and we've talked about
this. Has been great.
This has been really cool to talk about stuff. Not like that Theo guy. Wait, no, I'm kidding.
What do you mean? This guy right here?
That guy.
All right.
You thought you were Batman, Steven. Theo's clearly.
Yeah. I think this is the guilt from Pulp Fiction.
Who's the real Batman here? Who's this Joker? Who's this Joker you're talking to?
It's like Batman if WWF Batman.
Where did you get that mask is what I want to know. You just made that on the spot?
I think it's gaff tape.
Looks like a plastic bag. Well done.
And it's actually like Batman was kind enough to make sure he signed in as Batman, as you can see on that.
Yeah.
Oh my God! Yes, I made it on the spot. I couldn't find a Batman mask in time.
You just couldn't find one around the house.
I wanted to do something special, so I made it. It's just some Scotch tape around here, cut out the mouth. It was a bag that was from the Amazon, but
Where's my package? I'm not wearing hockey pads, are you?
Yeah. Oh
hey, I thought I'd
God.
try to steal the show this week instead of Steven stealing the last one. You know.
I know,
Yeah.
right? I know.
Well done. I think you upped the ante there.
I was waiting for Tom or Gabe or someone to step in and try and steal it, but no, we got the two stealingest members of Gob. What?
Right.
Yeah.
I'm gonna get Theo back here for a second. Hang on for a second.
Okay, yeah. Steve, Batman, thank you. You never see Batman and Theo in the same
Hi,
room at the
guys.
same time. Oh, there he is.
There he is.
Now, what do I have to do to get you two to get together to make a Stranger Radio shirt? To get you two to start thinking about stepping forward with the next chapter of Gob.
Well, I guess we should get Tom on here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's next. We'll find him and free him up. It's like we're almost kind of like just doing this as sort of a way of trying to make you guys back to work.
Yeah. Well, no. We've been writing. Tom's been writing. I heard a bunch of songs that he actually let me hear over FaceTime audio. And I let him hear some stuff too. So we're still writing. We're writing for Gob for sure.
Of course you are. Yeah.
And we want obviously something to come out where
We write one song a year, so 3 more years we'll have an album.
Perfect.
we're trying to we want to outdo Adele. Like she took only I think 6 or 7 years to put an album out, so we just wanted to. We wanted the Mutt Lange Def Leppard this one a bit.
Yeah,
for sure.
Hysteria or Chinese Democracy. Like, really put some time in. Really kind of make it work.
It's the secret to success for sure.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I'm really happy we got to hang out with you guys again. Thank you for making an appearance, Theo.
Yeah, well, Steven had no idea too. So
he didn't know. And now we start. Now that we're all here, we can make plans for the pizza party at Theo's place, so we can watch. Oh shit! What was that Thor movie called again? Rock and Roll Nightmare.
Yeah, that's right. Rock and Roll Nightmare.
That's right.
That's the one that Steven edited for the Thugs. That's right.
Dude, where did you find that movie? I totally forgot about that movie until.
I had a list. So the last Gob album, Apartment 13, I made music videos for every song on that album from old cult movies. And so I kind of had like this list of all these, some really well known, some not known at all. So I just kind of had that one sitting around ready to kind of go for Theo's thing.
Perfect.
That's amazing.
No, it works so well in you have a great sense of timing when things kind of get more intense and whatnot too. It's brilliant. You got a real skill at that.
Yeah. And you know what the irony in all of our conversation today is that, and no joke, Jody and I are having vegan lasagna tonight.
Oh, really?
In fact, this conversation has really helped me because I'm supposed to take it out of the deep freeze, and I was supposed to do hours ago. So maybe we're not going to have it tonight.
I'd have to do it.
That is some kismet shit,
microwave on
man.
defrost mode and help you out.
Yeah, 100%.
That's
I
so
wanted
rad.
but is it possible before we go that Corey can play us out on the fiddle the solo for Don't Be Ridiculous?
You know what? I just sent out all my fiddles to rehearsal space for tomorrow, but I have one here that my
Don't make me bring out my harmonica and finish this out.
Don't do it, Theo. Please.
That's right.
That's right. There's a fiddle.
It's So my aunt Norma gave this to me. My great aunt Norma. She lives in Kelowna, and she's in her 90s.
Oh wow.
Very sweet person, and she gave me this one. Yeah, is that the one?
This is the kind of stuff you hear on Stranger Radio.
There you go.
Corey Churko, play
You're
us
welcome.
out.
It's fucking hard to play a violin. Like, I mean, obviously I
Dude,
have to.
yeah.
It's so hard. It's
Dude.
It is hard.
I dated a girl that played the violin, and she played it for many years since she's like 7 years old. So yeah, and then I wasn't dating her when she was 7.
Well, you were 7 too, so that's
We got to end it with that. We got to end it with
And
Good night, everybody.
That was great. Thank you, Corey. Thanks for doing that, because I wanted you to do that the last time for me on the last episode.
Right,
I
right.
forgot, but we ran out of time. Because...
Amazing. Steven, I'm coming out that way next year with Slash, so Beacon Theater, so I'm going to look you up. That's
Yeah,
not
let's do
far
it.
from you. Beacon Theater's not too far.
No, we'll go. I'll take it to the best vegan pizza in town.
yes.
Booyah.
What are you talking about?
100%.
I
Let's
don't
do
live
it.
there.
Yeah. Well, you might
You
have
gotta
to come
come
out
too.
too.
Yep.
You can crash at Steven's house for 3 days. That's it. That's the cutoff.
I've been there. What was the last? How long? I stayed at your place for how many days? Last 4 days or 3 days?
Yeah, that last day. Ooh.
That fourth day, right? This,
Just 1 day too long. Yeah.
I had to get a plumber. It was a whole thing.
what was weird about the air mattress is that how I had to blow through Steven into the air mattress, because
Oh my God.
that's the way he told
Yeah.
me how it works.
We've gone to the next level.
Okay,
that sounds
sorry
like
about
that sounds like some misinformation. I don't know how that. You might wanna-
He's like, sure, blow into this weird fleshy colored hose.
Oh my God.
And I was just like, what's this? All right, let's try it. This is sure taking a long time.
Your puzzlement with what it was interesting.
yeah. You're puzzled.
What is this?
What is this? This is a weird looking mattress.
Hilarious.
Thank you
Why is it
guys.
attached to you?
Yeah.
Anyway.
Sorry for taking the show to that. dirty
Love
gutter.
it. Love it. Love it.
Okay.
All right, lads. Big love.
Bye,
Have
everybody in the
fun.
audience.
Bye, everybody. Thanks for hanging out.
Bye, Gob guys. Yeah, thanks so much. You guys have been awesome.
Thanks, you guys.